Hello and welcome to our third book club session for Design for How People Learn. We're really excited to have you back here with us today to talk about chapters 7, 8, and 9. All right, so today with me we have Joanie Musser, who is the brain behind getting this whole program. So I'm going to turn this over and get out of the way so that we can start learning and discussing and talking about how we might apply some of these principles. So Joanie, it's all yours.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to be back for our third week. And today with us, we have Gabby Grimaldo, and she is one of our accelerators. And I'm going to let her introduce herself just because she has such a unique instructional design position. And I want her to be able to tell you all about it. And then we're going to start answering some of those questions that we had posted for you. So we're all ready to get to fill your brains with lots of fun knowledge. But first, Gabby, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Joanie. So like Joanie said, my name is Gabby, first name Gabriella, but only my mom calls me that when I get in trouble. So I have just like Joanie said, a really unique position. So I'm a learning and development project manager. And I had never heard of that until this position was, basically open for me at the company I'm at now. And so right now I manage learning projects kind of in an ad hoc way. Still requires instructional design knowledge, knowledge about e-learning. And I basically strategically help plan out these projects and manage the team that puts them together. So it's really fun. I get to use a bunch of different skills. If this is something, if you want a blend of like consulting and management and ID and e-learning, I think that job is perfect for you, for someone that wants to exercise all the different things in ID.
So are you all ready to jump into the book?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. So chapter 7, 8, and 9. If you're in the chat and you're following along with us, I want you to comment your answer to this question. When you read chapter 7, 8, and 9, what was or is the most important point you think that Julie Dirksen, the author, made in these chapters? I've listed my top 4. There's actually more, but I put them in order so I wouldn't bore you all. And then Gabby's going to talk about hers as well.
So for me in chapter 7, the practice and feedback are necessary for developing skills. Like that one-liner in there just really popped out at me. And I say that because, in the construction industry, and Joanie, you and I talked about this, they follow an apprentice model. So it's very much I do, you watch, you do, I watch, and then we do it over and over until you kind of get it. Sometimes it only happens one time and then you're left on your own to try and figure it out, and it's sort of sink or swim. So we are getting in our organization, we are trying to change that mindset a lot of let's give opportunities for practice, especially practice where people can kind of fail, and not have dire consequences, because construction's fast moving. So we need to get them to be able to practice and not fail, like when they are on a job, like on a job site, actually working on a project. So, and teaching our people how to give appropriate feedback, because sometimes they're a little rough around the edges when they give feedback. And then for chapter 8, I really got caught in this line that Julie talks about. And for me, I have the electronic book, so I'm sorry, my pages are going to be off. Everyone, I have the Kindle. So practice and feedback is talked about on page 295 in the Kindle. And then for this one-liner, it's page 324 and 325. So she talks about learning from experience and how important that is. But the problem is that sometimes we have a hard time learning when the consequence is much later. And so this really got me thinking about change management in learning, where sometimes we have to, and I do this in project management, sometimes I have to incorporate consequences on our own, like in our own plan, different feedback points and touch points where somebody's getting triggered when they're going through training, or when we're piloting training, for example. Like in my pilot plan that I have, we have check-in points, I have very specific directions, and I have something like, if this happens, then I need you to come to me and type this in the Teams chat. So sometimes we have to incorporate change management in order to really get our people to learn the best way. And so that really got me thinking about, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about change management later too. And then for chapter 9, I don't know if she actually put this formula in here. I thought that she did, and I typed it out and I was like, I don't see it in here. But Julie on page 343 in the Kendall talks about the 3 kind of pieces that make up a habit, and that's motivation, ability, and a trigger. And I thought this was just like such a nifty formula to kind of keep in mind as you're designing training. You know, we don't really learn in a vacuum. Self-paced kind of learning is great, you know, allows people to have that autonomy to kind of move at their own pace. But if you look at the Accelerator program that Shawntay's designed, feedback is incorporated, right? There's a couple of triggers in there of like posting your badges and stuff. And she gives us background and theory to increase our ability to get through the content, and the accountability triads to kind of help with our motivation. So really keeping that in mind. And I like this formula because it gives me something to talk about to people who are not as familiar with learning and development and the process of learning for adults. And that's really important as a project manager in the projects that I work in, because I have to be able to communicate why we're doing something the way that we're doing and getting, you know, the stakeholders on board.
I think we may have to see your formula, Gabby, because I'm like, I don't remember the formula.
I know. I was just looking through the book too. I'm like, what page is this on? I don't see it.
So let me flip through and see if I can find the section for it while we're chatting. I know for sure chapter 9.
Yeah,
I think it's her anatomy of a habit. And
yes.
I kind of made it up myself. And actually I left 3 other pieces off of there. So I apologize for that.
But it's just, she has them as bullet points.
Yeah, she does. I made up. I was like, add all of these things together, and that's what you get as a habit. Plus.
Page 231 for anybody that has the actual book. And I actually did some annotations on this page with those bullets. So for like the first one, the acquired behavior pattern, I just put, they have to want to do it, right? Or you have to make them want to do it. And then those triggers. I had said it. Gabby and I had a conversation the other day. We were talking about the book as well. And I came up with this on my own, I thought. And then I got to chapter 9 and I was like, oh, Julie's saying it. And it's just pretty much those if-then statements.
Yep. Where
if this happens, what triggers it? Then this. So that if is the trigger. And that and the then this is the actual action that you want to, or the habit that you want to have, right? So that's stated pretty much on page 231 as well. And then it does talk about the anatomy and control, that motivation piece.
I thought chapter 9 was really interesting too. Like just even like this new area of study around habit design, right? And how that can influence learning. So I was taking a lot of notes there, and then just like, you know, how do you implement habit making in a way that's successful in your learning? I thought that the way that she broke it up, the anatomy of the habit was good, like shrinking the habit, all of those little pieces. And then one of the problems, it's a good problem, but one of the problems that I have with reading Julie's book is that I get so distracted. Like I'll read something and then my brain like goes off on a noodle. Like,
yes.
How do I do this in this scenario? I really like the examples of what you were just talking about, Joanie, the implementation intentions. You know, like, so if you're in a situation where you're trying to like change a habit or to create a habit, how do you create that structure so then that habit formation is successful? So it's just like really thinking about it holistically, like what are the habits that we want them to do in their smallest part? And then how do we create that structure? I just thought that was really
breaking
good.
Habits as well. So in the chat, if you look, Abby Johnson's with us today, and she says that she loved learning about the behavior change, like with the TAM model, which we're going to talk about because that's in chapter 8, and how gamification can support motivation. So that's true, putting those little game-like elements in it. So question number 2, audience, reflect on what you know about andragogy. Based on the information in these 3 chapters, how can you best design learning solutions for adult learners? And Gabby's been talking about her adult learners. While you're thinking about this, I highlighted mostly information from chapters 8. So the TAM model, technology acceptance model, I put a little note in my notes about that. Looking at diffusion of innovations, looking at that learner perception of an innovation. And Gabby touched on that a second ago, and she was talking about, look, it might be innovative to put some gaming stuff in here, but it's not always what the learner wants or expects, and they may not appreciate it. And then we're talking a little bit about self-efficacy. So Gabby, what do you think about this? Based on what we've learned here, how can we implement better for our adult learners?
So for me, I think I pulled a lot from chapter 7 and maybe chapter 8 as well. I should have written my chapters down. But for me, this industry, people are older. They tend to be a little bit older than if you were to look at like a company that was tech focused, finance focused. And actually there's a bit of a gap. So we have very young people coming in, and then people who have been in this industry for like 15, 20 years, and then not as much, kind of in between. So I have some learners that are very technology savvy and some learners that are not so technology savvy. And so I kind of have to meet, everybody somewhere in the middle. And, I don't think Julie had really talked about this in any of these chapters, but a mentoring model where we have learners, or I guess you could put this under the social aspect, right? She talks a lot about that. Where we have our learners kind of paired up and learning from each other. We've really tried to implement that at our job sites, where somebody that's been in the industry for a while mentors some of the younger employees that have just started. Because, most of these kids are coming straight out of high school, doing these trade jobs. They're very young, not always, college educated. So we've had some individuals too that also are English is not their first language. So I have those learners in there as well. So that's a barrier that I often have to think about, like while I'm designing training. And so I think that creating very social learning where everybody's interacting with one another and kind of helping each other is a very big priority, because I also want it to kind of bleed out to the job site. And, construction's very project focused. And so these employees are going to be together for long periods of time. And there really is like, they build their own culture at these job sites. So they may be kind of remote. So they're not always coming into an office, right? They're going to a job site. They're working like 10, 12-hour days. Learning is not like always at the forefront. So we have to be very flexible with how we're implementing learning. So usually that means smaller doses of learning. So we kind of have to microdose learning or make it really give them the ability to learn on the go. And so that means like breaking it up into chunks. Julie talks about this, like the structured practice, right? I think is so important. Breaking it up for them and giving them ample opportunities to practice with some of those skills that they're learning. And really just breaking it down so that it is a manageable learning, and we're not like tiring them out with like a 4-hour training where they're sitting in the office. They do not like that. They don't learn that way. They're very hands-on, often always using their hands. You have to incorporate something where they're practicing, so that they're refining exactly what they're learning. Like it's actually going into their brain and getting solidified in there. And so I think the other pieces too, Julie talked about this. For me, it's page 358, but she talks about, it's in the habits. So designing for habits, creating items that can help people like easily implement a new habit. So I really harp on creating like rubrics and job aids and anything that my people can take out to a job site and refer back to if they need to go into the trailer. Be like, hey, do you remember that training that we had on leadership? Can I review that model again? Or, so that they can have something that they can take with them and they always have access to it, whether it's like a physical, kind of like laminated thing they keep up on a job trailer, or there's a space for them to like easily access all of that information that they've learned in a more digestible format.
Yes. Abby commented too, page 211 for anybody in the book. Goes right along with what you're saying, Gabby. Creating those goals for the learning experience. But I think on page 211, there's the model, and I can hold it up, I think, to my camera. I don't think it'll blur it out, but or maybe it will. It's where you do the smaller
Yes.
chunking. Okay.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Determining those immediate, the short term, the medium term goals, and then that long term goal, giving them that feedback. I thought that it was really interesting that she says there seems to be a benefit, and this is quoting the book, there seems to be a benefit in sleeping between learning reinforcement. So I learned it today, but if I sleep on it, then tomorrow I should be able to do it again and have better retention, because our brains need that a little bit of a break. Now, my brain doesn't shut off at night, so I'm not sure that applies to me, but to, I guess, most adult learners. After reading all of these different habits and how to form them in chapter 9, in the chat, tell us, what are some of your habits? Are any of them triggered by something else? Come on, I already talked about my coffee. And what are some things that you want to make a habit? Is there anything right now that you are thinking, I really want to make this a habit? It doesn't have to be health or lifestyle. It could be something else personally. It could be something else. Well, you don't have to share the personal, but professionally even. And what do you think a trigger is that you can use? I think that right there, having that plan and setting it up and having that trigger, so that when that trigger happens, that if, then that then will come along. So I want to challenge you to do that as well. So even though it really isn't about learning necessarily, all of those things have a trigger, and all of those things create an action. So just wanted to kind of keep that in your mind about this chapter. Also, we only have one. We're going to go ahead and go to the last slide, I guess. We are going to read chapters 10, 11, and 12 after this, and that finishes the book. But guess what? Julie Dirksen is going to be here with us in November. What is the date?
Yay.
2nd? Is that what the date?
I think Des Mill told me it was November 2nd whenever
Yes,
I was checking on it yesterday.
So she's going to be with us. So all of you that are on with us, and if you're listening to the replay, awesome. Feel free to shoot me some messages if you want to in LinkedIn or through Facebook, or even Sarah, because she's collecting them as well. But start thinking about some questions that you want to ask Julie, because she's going to be on live with us, and we can kind of curate those questions and get them ready to ask her live. And you can get your question answered live on air with us. And that's all I have. Shawntay, you want to wrap it up? And
Sure.
Gabby for being with us.
So Gabby, it was really incredible to have you here with us and bringing all of what we were talking about into real life, because a lot of times we read things or we take a class and it's the theory of something or the best practice of something. And it's really hard to connect the dots between what we read or what we experienced in the classroom to the real world. So all of the examples that you brought in today just really help solidify that and make some of this more concrete. So that was really, really helpful. And I really appreciate you doing that. And Joanie, of course, thank you for prepping this and coming up with the questions and always being so organized in the way that you are. I really enjoyed 7, 8, and 9. I think I might have enjoyed it a little bit more than some of the other chapters, because I mean, just even little simple things like creating variety in the types of feedback, right? That was one that resonated with me. Like, I always say feedback is gold, but I am redundant in how I do that. So just like thinking about that in a different form. I was chatting with Darlene earlier today, and she had done a portfolio review for someone, and she did it in a video format. And it was so good. It's like, oh yes, that's another great way to do feedback. So it's like everything in my world right now is around chapter 7, 8, and 9 is what it feels like, because it's top of mind and present. I hope that everyone who watches the replay, who is here with us live, that these examples are resonating with them, and that it really gets you noodling on different things and how it might inform your instructional design process. I hope everyone has a great afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are in the world. And we will see you soon.